2.6 is the last part of Chapter 2 in Excel, and we're going to start out by talking about the sumif function. So sumif is kind of a combination of sum and if functions, which we've talked about. So the sumif is going to add up numbers if they meet a certain criteria. So for example, we can go find our sumif function, and you'll notice there's a couple. So the range that we want to look at is whatever set of numbers you're evaluating. And the criteria is we want to add up the numbers if the numbers are greater than $10,000. And so what it did is it picked through all this information, and for example, it didn't add this one or this one because they weren't greater than $10,000. If we update that to say maybe $20,000, you'll notice the answer is going to change because now it excluded this one, and this one, this one, as well as those first two. So it's basically if you want it to do a certain addition, but only if it meets certain criteria, it's just a way of putting two functions together and not having to do a nested function. The next thing is to talk about rounding. I know rounding in engineering is pretty important. So let's get a number that is definitely 7 divided by 1.57, some big number. And we don't want it as a date. We want it as a number. So we're going to format that cell to appear just as a number. And we want to show quite a few decimal places. We want an odd number though. So rounding, what the round function is going to do is we'll go into our function box. There's a couple of different rounds. There's round up, round if, so we'll pick just plain round. We want to round this number, and on the number of digits, it's going to tell you how much accuracy to round to. Negative numbers is going to round to the left of the decimal point if it's less than 0. 0 is going to round to the nearest integer. And if you do numbers greater than 0, it's going to round to the right of the decimal. So let's say we want to round this to 3 decimal places past the whole number. So we want to round this to 4.446 is what we want to show. If we do that, we're going to put in the number 100 should give us to the 100th place, and it looks like that did thousandths. One definitely does this. There we go. It's basically just the number of digits you want to round to. 1 will give you 1 decimal, 2 will give you 2 decimals. If you put in a 3, that will give you 3 decimal places. And then you can also increase or decrease the decimals that are showing by clicking these buttons. So if you ever want to change how it's displayed, that's a quick, easy way to do it. If you want to round to the left of the decimal, then you can again say, we'll copy this, we'll change our reference, make sure it's back up here. We did a relative reference there. So let's say we want to do a negative number. -1. That's going to round down. If you do a -0.1, that will round you down to just 4. And the rounding is a little bit odd, so you may have to pick around until you get those decimals figured out right. The other thing you can do too is set it exactly equal to 0, because you know that is going to give you the whole number. That's going to give you the integer. I think if this number was a bigger number, like let's pick one in the thousands that has a weird decimal, you'll notice again that one rounds to 3 decimal places. And I think showing that -1, it rounds it to 1 decimal place. -2 rounds it to 2 decimal places to the left of the decimal point. So that is how you can set in the function to round. And the last quick thing I want to talk about is kind of a trig function. Anytime you have to use pi, we know pi is 3.1415, infinite number of decimals past the 3.14. If you ever want to use, I think Excel uses 15 decimals. If you ever want to use it in calculation, you can say equals, you can type pi, and then you can open and close parentheses, and that will give you, again, if this is formatted to a number and not a date, that's going to give you pi to as many decimal places as you want it. So anytime you use pi, just make sure you put that open and close parentheses on it, and that's really the trick to that. So that should wrap up Chapter 2 Excel.